Hi, my name is Anita Mori, and today I'm going to teach you a little project. It's a mixed media. It's called Hello Friends, and it's done in a mixed media book. So let's get started. So today's project is done in a Grumbatcher mixed media book. It's a 5 by 5 by 8.5 inches. And what's nice about these that you can take these pages out by pinching the rings and putting them back in. The background is going to be done with a brayer, and I'm going to be using Deco Art Media Fluid Acrylics today, Americana paint. I'm also going to be using brushes by Dynasty, the Palmer brushes, the black gold brushes, and some Stencil Pro brushes. So the background I've already prepped with 2 coats of gesso, and the color that we're going to be using for the background is Cobalt Teal Hue, Titanium White, Cobalt Turquoise Hue, and Burnt Sienna. We're also going to be using this stupendous stamp set, and it's called Inspiring Text. I have here some archival ink, jet black. I'm just going to move this aside. Okay, so what I want to do is stamp the background to start with the stamp set. And what I'm going to do is just stamp the middle section and just lay it in different sections of your paper. Okay, we're going to let that dry. Move this aside. I'm going to apply some white, titanium white on my my palette here, and we're going to use this little ink roller brayer. So I'm going to apply all my colors on my palette. Burnt sienna. Alrighty, and you also need a little bit of a baby wipe just to wipe your brayer in between layers. Okay, so I'm going to roll my brayer into the white, and I'm going to lay in different areas the white paint. This will just fade out some of the writing. I don't need a whole lot. So I'm just going to wipe it a little bit on this baby wipe. I'm going to pick up the next color, which is Cobalt Turquoise Hue. And I'm going to lay this on different angle on my paper. Keep picking up. Whoop, I picked up a little bit of brown. And my color's a little too close. And the background, you may want a little bit more blue than brown. I have a little bit of more brown in the background. I'm just going to add a little bit more of this blue here. You don't have to add a lot of pressure to the brayer. So now I'm going to pick up the other blue, which is Cobalt Teal. I'm going to lay it on top of this one. Just want a little bit more. Okay, now the last color is going to be your burnt umber. So I'm just going to wipe this blue. See how it comes clean after you wipe it on the baby wipe. So the brown, depending on how much brown you want in your background, you can just apply very lightly. And I'm not trying to hide my words. I want to see my words in the background. So I think I'm happy with the way this is. I'm gonna just wipe my brayer. Okay, and then I'm just gonna let this dry for a few minutes. I'm gonna explain to you my little girl. What I did was I took another page from my book, and I didn't apply gesso. All I did was I traced it, my pattern. I transferred it on here with graphite paper. I base coated all of this with Americana paint, and then I added multi-purpose sealer on top of the girl so that we can add extra colors to it. So I'm going to go back to here. We're going to do some stenciling in the background, and I used the bubbles by R12 Studio, and I'm going to use the Stencil Pro. It's a 3/8, and we're going to use the color Primary Cayenne. So I'm going to add this to my palette. And what I do is I take paper towel. I'm going to load my bristle with the paint. Okay, and I'm going to wipe it on the paper towel just so that I don't have a big blob of paint when you're stenciling, because then you're going to have bleeds in the background. So I'm going to go in circular motion, adding some little circles here. And I'm going to go in different little sections here. And you can go a long ways with the blue without having to reload. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit over here. I'm going to just reload it, wipe it on my paper towel. And you know, I didn't do this on my previous little project, but we can also add some white little bubbles. You can add as many as you want. A little bit here. Okay, I'm going to add some white bubbles on here. And I'm going to use some, I think I used some titanium white. I'm going to add a little bit more. And I'm going to use a different stencil brush here. So I'm going to dip that in my water. I have a little bit bigger brush. So let's just load this up. Again, I'm going to wipe it on the paper towel. And you can go over top your blue bubbles if you like. This is just having fun with your background. And add a little bit more paint. Okay. So I'm going to put that aside. And I also for the Hello Friends, I used here, it's Creative Coach Lori Speltz, and it's Greetings, Hello, Welcome. I used this, and I used Hello over here, and I added it close to the edge here. So we're gonna have to let dry in between coats, because what I did first is like a shadow. So I did white first, and then I did the burnt umber. So for this, I did use Americana paint, just because it's not as, it's a little thicker than the fluid acrylic. So I'm gonna take my little 1/4 inch. You can use a bigger one. It doesn't make a difference. So what I do is dip in Snow Titanium White, and then wipe on the palette paper. And you are going to need a couple coats of this, so we'll let it dry in between coats. So it's like dry brushing. I'm not stippling. I'm just going in circles. So I did my hello, and then I'm gonna go to my friends. I'm gonna line this up. Pick up some more white here, and I wipe it on a paper towel every time I load my brush. I'm gonna make sure that I don't pick up other words from the stencil. And I add pressure on stencil just so that it stays in place. You can add tape to this too, so it doesn't move while you're stenciling. Okay, now the hello should be dry, so I'm gonna do a second coat, and it's easy to replace the stencil. Okay, I'm gonna hold it in place, pick up some more white. So I think it took about 3 coats for it to be, 3 to 4 coats for it to be solid. And I'm gonna go back to my friends. Oops. So I go in circles, right, left, just so that it doesn't bleed in between my letters. Okay, so I'm gonna add a couple more coats, and I'll be right back. Okay, I added 4 coats of white for my Hello Friends. I cleaned my stencil with baby wipes so that I can move on to my next color. And I forgot to mention that when you're using Stencil Pro brushes, you always use them dry, not wet. So for adding the next layer, what I did do is, so I line it up and I move it a little bit to the left so that it adds a little bit of shadow. Not much, just a little bit. And then I pick up burnt umber, and I'm going to wipe it on my paper towel. And this also will need like 4 coats of burnt umber. And keep picking up some burnt umber here. Okay, and then I'm gonna see how it does a little shadow here. I'm gonna do the friends, same thing. I'm gonna line it up, and I'm gonna move it a little bit to the left. You don't want a whole lot of paint on your brush. In circular motion. Okay, I'm going to continue with my brown. Okay, so I finished adding my burnt umber Hello Friends, and I added about 3 coats of this. I want to show you how to clean your stencil while the paint is fresh. All you do is use paper, baby wipe and just wipe. I'm sorry, my camera is moving. Oops. Just keep wiping it. This is just temporary until you're able to get to the sink to wash it. And you got to be careful with your little letters here. You don't want to bend your little E. And then you can clean the back too. Any running paint that went to the back. Okay. We're done with the stencil. Okay, and the next step that I did do is I used the same stencil, which I didn't clean. I used the same stencil, and what I did was a little texture of bubbles with using the modeling paste, which I have right here. It's by DecoArt Media, and I used a palette knife, and I just want to add a little bit of texture. It makes the little bubbles pop out, and I'm gonna do it mostly on the blues, only because if you did it on the white, you wouldn't see it. This one here is clear. So I pick up a little bit, and I'm going to place my little bubbles here, and I'm going to just, you can see it more on the blue. And you can put some on your words too if you want. Okay. Add a little bit more here. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry. I can also put some in the middle here. Just right here. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry. We're gonna move on to our little girl. I'm gonna just set this aside. And I'm gonna clean. You have to clean your stencil when using modeling paste, because it's gonna dry really stiff on the stencil, and you don't want to ruin it. I'm just gonna wipe it. Wipe some of this paint off while I'm at it. Okay. We're done with this one. I'm going to put it aside. Also, because these are jars, wipe around the rim so that your lid doesn't glue to the jar. Okay, I have my little girl here. And I'm just going to change my palette paper to a clean one. Okay. I'm also going to use the, it's Stupendous clear stamp set. It's Daisy Thanks. So this is what I used for the flower here. I'm just in love with this stamp set. I'm gonna take the stamp off. And I'm going to use a stamp block here. I'm going to place that on top. I'm going to use my ink again. And I didn't prep the paper. I left it the way it was. And I'm only going to try and stamp just this big flower because the other ones will be cut out. So I'm going to add some ink. And I'm just going to stamp on this paper somewhere where I'm going to get my whole flower and add pressure to it. Oh, it's not dark enough. Let me add some more. Okay, let's add more pressure here. That's okay, we're gonna trace it with black. I don't know why I can't get it today unless I use more paper. Let me try another paper. I'm gonna have to invest in one of those Misty stamp holder. Let's try that again. Maybe it's my surface, I'm not adding enough pressure. It's one of those hit and miss. Okay, let's try one more time. I'm trying to rub as much ink as I can on my paper. Okay, let's just leave it like that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to trace it. It's not working for me today. Okay, here's my little girl. So the first thing I'm going to use is Deco Hot Shot. It's Fury Red, and I'm going to use a 4 dome brush by Dynasty, and you always use these dry. So I'm going to add a little bit to the boots in her little dress. So you just need a little bit of this. And I load my bristle. And I'm going to wipe it as much as I can on the paper towel. And just in circles, just add the color. You may need to repeat this a few times till you get the right consistency of the float. Or the dry brush, I should say. And when it dries, it does brighten up, just so you know. Just gonna go in this circle. You can also dab if you want to add like a little bit more brightness. Like if I want to dab over here to add a little bit more color. In the corner. Okay, I'm gonna leave this the way it is because the color will pop out once it dries. Okay, I'm gonna wipe my brush. Okay, now we're gonna float the little face here. I base coated it with sugared peach, and then we're going to float with toffee. And I use angular brush for this, and it is a 3/8 black gold by Dynasty. Okay, so I'm going to add toffee. I'm going to wet my brush. And I'm going to dab a little bit on my paper towel. I'm going to pick up and load my brush. So what I do is I float it underneath the hairline. Okay, and if you accidentally put some on the hair, that's okay, because we need to recoat another burnt umber on the hair. And then I'm going to pick up again, and I'm going to go around the bottom of her face here. And it's okay if you go past the line, because we're going to trace this out with some black and cut the paper out. So I'm just going to soften my float using a mop brush, and you use it in a pouncing motion. Okay. My cheeks, they're dry brushed with Tuscan Red. So I'm going to add Tuscan Red, and I'm going to use the little dome brush for the cheeks. And I made sure that my Fury Red was all out of the brush. So I'm going to load my brush. I'm going to wipe it on the paper towel as much as you want, because it's always best to go light in color and add more if needed. So I want it like really faint. And I also wipe the sides, because you don't want like a blob of paint on the side that you and then accidentally put it on your project. So in the middle, I'm going to go in a circular motion. You may say, oh, I got no paint on here, but you will have paint on here. You go in circles, and then just wipe. It's almost dry. Okay. And they're not perfect circles. Next, I'm going to dab my little nose with Tuscan Red, and what I did was I used the bottom of a brush handle, and I just dipped in it in the paint, and I added it in this circle. You can have a bigger nose if you want. I just added a small one. That way you get a perfect little circle. And the eyes, the mouth is all done with lamp black in the Americana colors. And again, I use the handle of the brush. So I'm gonna dab, and I pick up fresh paint when I do the other eye. Okay, and for the mouth, I used, it's a rigger it's a 10-0 rigger by Faux Squirrel Dynasty, and I have it wet. I'm gonna thin out my paint a little bit. I'm gonna load my brush, and you can also always trace your mouth if you want to, or just do it freehand. So I start here and to the other end. I'm gonna add a little chin here, my eyebrow. And for the eyelashes, I like to do this while the paint is still fresh. So what I do is I just pull a little bit from the dab of paint. And I have to go to the side. So you pull the little lashes while the blob of paint is wet. And the little for the little dots, we'll do those at the end when my black is dry. Another suggestion that I recommend is always do your dots last, because what could happen is you're painting away and your hand accidentally goes onto the blobs of paint. So they're always best to do last, but I just did it now. I'm gonna try and be careful and hope for the best. Okay, for the hair, we're gonna start with the hair, and I'm gonna add another coat of burnt umber, and we also need Snow White. I'm gonna add some paint to my palette here, and I used a number 3 round brush, and what I did was, you can see my paint here. I'm gonna move this aside. So what I did was I loaded my brush with burnt umber, and I'm gonna add another coat because we're gonna add little streaks of it's actually white. When the paint is wet, it'll turn to a different brown, another shade. And for the bangs, you can also add little hairlines, which I did do here. I added little hairlines. That's totally optional. I'm just going to turn this aside so I can fix my bangs here. Okay, so while the paint is still wet, I'm going to take my little liner, and I'm going to add little hairlines. So just pull in different sections here. You don't need a whole lot. Picking up. So I just added a few. Okay, your brush is dirty, my round brush. I'm going to pick up some white. I'm going to drag it into the white, so that way you had 2 different tones of color here. And then I'm going to start from the top here, and I'm just going to stroke in some little hairlines. Start from the bottom and work into the top. You can add a little bit more white if you want. Okay, and then we're gonna float the top here. So what I'm gonna do is clean my brush, and I'm gonna do the same for the little ponytails here. So I'm gonna base coat the hair. I'm gonna just turn this around. Again, I'm trying to be careful not to touch my eyes. Okay, and I'm gonna pick up some white, so just drag it into the white here. And I'm gonna do some long strokes. And by the time I do this, my brush is a little bit, seems dry, so which is okay. I'm gonna do the same for the other one. Okay, I just realized that I floated the dry section instead of the wet section. Oh, no wonder it's different color. Okay, let's do this one again. Okay, I'm gonna, this here is dry, so what I'm gonna do is take my angle brush, and I'm gonna add a little float of burnt umber to the top of the head. This just tones down the bangs. Okay, you can do this the same for beside the barrettes. Okay, moving on to the dress. So I've painted the shirt with Snow White and the leggings, and I'm gonna float with toffee. So I'm gonna pick up some toffee here. And I added a float at the bottom of the collar here beside the dress. Just pick up a little bit here off the red. And I did the inside of the shirt here. And pick up a little bit more. I have to turn my piece around. Okay. Swipe this. Now the legging, we float that after we add the little stripes to it. So the stripes are done with, it is a number 5 shader. And what I do is, you can see my paint, is I'm going to, it's wet. I'm gonna just re-wet it here. So I lightly load it. I don't want a big blob of paint, so I just drag my bristles into the paint where it's nice and even. I'm gonna start from here and just add a curve to it. So when you do that, you're gonna have a little bit of a different dark to light when you do a little stripe. And I load every time I'm gonna add a stripe. So I do it in the shape of the leg. Again, I load. And I leave a gap in between the stripes. So I need to turn this around because I like to do it towards the stripes towards me. So again, I do like a little C stroke when you do the stripes. That way too, when you don't overload your bristle, you're not going to get that harsh line at the edge of the stripes. There, we're going to let that dry. And we're going to go back to the little girl's eyes. We're going to add some little highlight by just dabbing white dots. So I'm going to pick up, you can either do a stylus or you can do your rigger liner here. And I just dabbed my bristle into the white, and I want a little blob of paint at the end, so that way I just lightly dot my eyes and my cheeks. Again, you can use a stylus for this. It'll make a bigger little circle. Okay, for the dress is painted Tuscan red and the boots red, and we're gonna float with deep burgundy. Okay, and I'm gonna use my angler brush. So I'm gonna pick up some deep burgundy here, and I'm gonna float all along the edge of the dress. Down here. And I'm going to turn my piece around so I can do the this side here. Okay, and I'm going to go along the bottom here. So you're just going all around the shape of the dress. Let me wet my brush. Okay, along the edge here. Again, it's okay if you pass the line. It's going to be outlined with black. And over here. Okay, the boots. So I went along the top edge here. There's a little, shows the inside of the boots. So just dab with deep burgundy here. And over here, I'm gonna go around the top of the boot. So here, the Fury Red, it got a little brighter once it dried, but depending on your taste, you can always add a little bit more. I kept adding till I got a little bit of bright red. So let's take this Fury Red again, and we're just gonna add a little bit more. I'm gonna grab my dome brush, wipe it on the paper towel. Let's just add a little bit more here. A little bit more on the bottom. And I want a little bit more on my shoes. There. I like it just like that. Alrighty. Now we can float the top of the hem and the side of the stockings or the leggings. So I'm going to use toffee for this part here. So load my brush and go above along the shirt. And I do the outer side of the leggings. On the top here. And I just want to soften that up just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to turn this around. Soften it. Oops, I got some of my red boots here. I'm just going to wipe that off. Okay, what I did for the flower, I outlined a stem. And I did that in blue-green light. So what I did was, oops, I took my little round brush and dipped it in the paint, and I'm going to start here. It doesn't have to be perfect. So we're going to outline it, cut it. Okay. So I'm gonna finish the little girl, and what I'm going to do is you take the rigger brush and we're gonna outline the entire outer edges of the design. So I'm gonna pick up some fresh black here. I don't want a dry blob. Okay, so I have my brush wet just so that it's inky. And I'm gonna move this aside for a bit. I'm gonna outline the entire piece. So when you're using a liner, if you're gonna add pressure, it makes your, let me just reload. So you start thin, and then if you add pressure, you're gonna have a thicker line. Add pressure, you're gonna have a thicker line. But make sure it's really inky so that you have like a longer playtime with the brush. I didn't add black to the liner, to the bangs. I left it the way it was. I can add a little bit more brown to it. Because it's paper, it always seems dry. So I'm always picking up some more black. Okay. Moving on to this side. I'm still careful not to put my hand on the eyes because it could still be wet. And the lines don't have to be perfect. That's what's nice about mixed media. Okay, I'm gonna make this just a little thicker. So again, the lines don't have to be perfect. So when I load my brush, I'm like putting all my bristle into the paint so that I have wet paint to make more than one little section of a line here. Okay, so up here, okay, my little dress. And always start when you're tracing from top to bottom, because if you were to start from the bottom and going the way up, you'd have your hand run all the way to your project. So always start from your top to bottom. You can also use a black pen if you don't feel comfortable using a liner. Okay, I need more water, my paint here. I'm going to redo this part here. Want it a little thicker. Okay, and over here I have like a little crease in my knee. Oops. Again, it's okay. The line's not perfect. You're going to cut around it. Okay, and then boot. I want this just a little darker. Okay. So I'm going to cut my little girl and see if I can restamp my flower, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I finally got my stamp stamped right, and I cut out my little girl and I cut out my stem, and you leave a little square so that you can glue your flower onto it. After I cut out the little girl and all these pieces, what I did do is, so you don't see white along the edges, what you do is take your round brush and black, and you're just going to go along the edge with your bristle. I went ahead and I did all of it, and I did the stamp and the stem. But also you need to be careful, because sometimes you can accidentally get paint onto the surface. So just wipe it with water. Okay, so now we're ready to ink our little flower, and my hands are really messy. If your hands aren't dirty, you're not having fun. Okay, so for the flower, I'm going to use ultramarine blue. And I'm going to use my angle brush here. I'm going to wet my bristle and just lightly load with paint here. And I'm just going to float all along the edge, and we can go back and darken the color. So I'm just walking it, but I want to leave the tip white. It'll just be like a highlight for your flower. So just load very little, because this color is dark. And just walk it to the middle section here. And go all the way around. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more water to my bristle. Oops. Okay, so by the time you go all the way around, you're good to go for another coat. I mean, this paint dries really fast, which is nice about it. So I just want the tip part along the center of the flower, just to make it a little darker. As you can see, when I'm loading, I have a lot of water in my bristle. so that way the paint flows as you're shading. Right to there. Okay, my middle flower is done with yellow, and it's primary yellow and burnt umber. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow here. It's a lot of yellow. And some burnt umber. Okay, I'm gonna leave some water in my bristle. I'm gonna pick up a little bit of yellow here, and I'm gonna float the top area, run it to the middle section, clean my bristle, and I'm gonna pick up some burnt umber. And again, I have a lot of water in my bristle when I'm loading my brush. That way your paint, like, it just blends together when you're adding two colors. Okay, we're done with these pieces for now. I'm gonna let that dry. We're gonna go back to our background here, and we need to add some brown all along the edge here. So what I did is I took my round brush, and you need burnt sienna first. Okay, and I'm going to do that wet. So just water your paint down a little bit. That way it will allow your paint to flow when you're doing this. So you're going to go all along the edge. And when you get some along the edge, take your finger and just blend it in. Or dab. You want a little bit of distress along your paper. So I'm going to go all around with burnt sienna. That's okay. I'm going to let it run. And again, I want my paint to be watery when I load my brush. So I'm going to show you, I have a little petal here of burnt sienna. You can see that. And I'm going to run it all along the edge. If I add pressure to my brush, that's what makes it go to the front of the paper. You can do some along the little edges here. And I'm going to have this pattern packet on my website if anyone is interested. I'm going to add a list of supplies that I've used at the bottom of this video. Okay, so now I'm going to just wipe my brush. I'm going to pick up some burnt umber. And I have it right here. I'm going to water this down a little bit, and I'm going to go all along the edge, starting from the top. Let the water run. Whoops. Just wipe it. Again, go along the little creases here. Okay. Now we get to glue our little girl and her flower onto our surface here. And I'm going to use the modeling paste. It's really good to apply any, like, you can use it for stenciling like we did, or you can use it as a glue. I'm going to use my Palmer brush. It's a 1 inch. Okay, and I'm gonna put some behind my little girl here. So I'm gonna apply a generous amount. Make sure you have a lot along the edge so that way it glues to your surface. Okay, I'm just gonna grab a baby wipe and I'm just gonna clean my little section here so my paper doesn't glue to it. Okay, I'm gonna place this we're in the middle, just because I'm going to have my flower on the side here. Okay, so I'm gonna push down and I'm gonna make sure my fingers are clean. I don't want paint where it's not wanted. I'm just gonna wipe my fingers. Okay, push down on the paper. Okay, and we're gonna add some on the top. Get along the edges as well. Got a little bit of black here. Okay. So this way it sticks to your paper. Just going to pick up some of those big blobs that's on the edges here. Okay, now I had a little bit of wet paint. You have to really make sure your paint is dry before you glue on the pieces here. Okay, so I have my little stem, and so this has to go on each side of her little hand. So what I did was I cut it in half here. I want more towards the top. So that way this will go on this side and this will go on this side. So I have it a little long, so I'm gonna just cut a little bit off of this on an angle here. Okay, so let's go ahead and glue this. I'm gonna add a little bit of glue on here. And some on the stem here. Oops. So it's still a little long. Oh, it might be all right. So I need to make sure it's on the other side of the hand. Okay. Now we're going to glue our flower. I have little fuzzies on my brush here. Okay, we're going to add the flower. Add glue all around the edge. And you can have it on a slant like this. And it's going to overlap the little dress. And it's okay if it passes your page a little bit, that's fine. I'm gonna add a bit along the edge so that it sticks to my paper. Okay. Now again, I'm going to, yeah, I had a bunch of fuzzies on my dress, on my brush, I mean. Then I got it all over her face. Just wipe that down a bit. Okay, we're gonna wipe my bottle here so I can put my lid back on. Okay, before we add little highlights, we're gonna let it dry. I know it doesn't take very long to dry. What I did do is I had this Tim Holtz speckles, and I used the Tradition white modeling paste. You can also use the Media white modeling paste. That one's clear, so the only one I had on hand that was white was the Tradition. You don't see it as much, but I have little speckles on the words here. You can see it when it's close. So what I want to do, just to make it pop out a little bit more, I'm going to take some Snow White here, and I'm going to mix a little bit of the white paste with it. That way we'll have a little bit, it'll be a little bit more whiter. So let's pick up some of this modeling paste. I'm going to mix it with my white paint. You don't need a whole lot of paint, just to make it brighter. And the white paste is thicker than the clear modeling paste. Okay, I just want to grab some baby wipe. Let me put this aside. Okay, so you can add this anywhere. You can add it onto the little girl. I just want to make sure it's dry a little bit. So let's start on the top here. I'm going to pick some up with the palette knife here, and I'm going to spread it onto my paper here. And it's okay if I have some on the words. I think it's really cute. I have some on the hair. If you don't want it like in a specific area, clean your palette, and say you have too much on your letters, just wipe it off. You just scrape it off. Okay? Or if you don't want it on her face, just take some off. Oops. There. Okay, I'm gonna pick some more up. I'm just gonna add some over here. Add a little bit on the flower here. Okay, and a little bit down here. This is your little project. You make it how you want it, how you like it. I'm gonna add a little bit here. So much pretty. I'm gonna add a little bit over here and over on the top here. So this just adds a little texture. Okay, and again, try and clean your stencil right away so that it doesn't dry on your stencil. So clean both sides, just until you can get some soap and water onto here. Okay, and again, I'm going to wipe my jar. And the reason I had some saran wrap, it's because I don't want too much air in it, and I don't want it to dry, because if you don't use it every day, it will dry up. So I bundle it up, and I just close my lid really tight. Okay, you can do that with the modeling paste too. Any jars, gesso jars, varnish jars, it just makes it last a little longer. Okay, my last step for my little girl is I added some highlights here. Move this aside. So I added some highlights, like on the skirt, on the dress, the leggings, the boots. And what I have here are, it's called Jelly Roll Pens. It's white. So I got this here, there was 3 different sizes. There's a 10, a 5, and an 8. So I used an 8, and I'm gonna add some on. Oh, I need to make sure that I don't touch my little specks here. So I'm gonna touch some areas. Okay, so I have some on the heart, little lines and a dab on each side. Okay, and I have on the hand here, I have it on the leggings going down. And some on my boots. What else do I have? I have a little bit on my dress here. You can add it wherever you want. You can even add some on your little letters if you wanted to. I didn't do it on my other one, but I'm going to just turn this around, and I just want to make sure I don't touch my specks here. There's some right here. Whatever you want. I don't want to add too much on there because I have a lot of paste there. Okay. I'm pretty sure I got a little bit on the hair here. Oops. And I did add one on my flower, but you won't see it as much because it's yellow. Okay, now this should be dry. So my last step that I did was I added a little bit of shading underneath, underneath and on the right side of my little girl here, just to make it pop out. So I used burnt umber in the Americana. Okay, so I'm going to put a little fresh dab, and I'm going to use my angle brush. And I did make it a little watery. I didn't make it a solid, so I have a lot of water on my bristle here. Okay, so I still need to make sure I don't touch my specs. Okay, I added some underneath the boot. I added some underneath the skirt here and all along my flower on the right side. So it's messy, it's not perfect. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit more water on my brush. Okay, so now I'm gonna turn this around, and I'm gonna just add on the right side, making sure I don't touch my little specks. Get into the little cracks of the hair here. Okay, I went all along the edge on the right side. I'm gonna do it at the bottom here of my stem. Oops, I added some on my little leggings, just wipe it off. Okay, over here. Just turn your brush on an angle to get into the little tight areas. Okay, and I have like along this little hair ponytail here. Just turn your brush on an angle, and I think that's about it. all on the right side and underneath my boot. Just want to add a little bit more here. And there we go. I hope you enjoyed this project, and please like, share, and subscribe. I look forward to making some new projects with you, and thanks for joining me. Okay, I'm going to add this little clip because I totally forgot to demonstrate my little specks in the background. I had some media shimmer master in violet and carbon black, and it added a little bit of like little specks. And what I did do was I took the lid off only because it spatters way too much. So I'm going to take my finger and just get some on there. I'm going to just tap it. Okay, and what I do is I take a baby wipe and I'm going to blob it just so it leaves little wet specks in the background instead of little spatters. So just keep dabbing till you blend the colors together. So I'm going to add some more down here. I'm trying not to get my little girl too much. Okay. And then you have some on your paper, so you can go all the way around. I'm just going to take this off. You can just dab and just lightly. And what's nice about this, if you don't like it, just wipe it off. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit here with the rest that I have. Okay, so I'm going to do the same with carbon black, and I'm going to undo the lid here. I'm going to tap some colors. Okay, I don't want a whole lot, I just want a little bit. Okay, again, I'm going to just dab with a clean spot of my baby wipe. If you want more, just add a little bit more along the edges here. I'm going to take whatever's left over. I'm just going to blot on the little edges here. And that is how you do your specs.